Hello friends, welcome to a brand new segment we're doing here at 9 News. We're going to take you behind the scenes of our 9 News investigators. Joining me, our lead investigator reporter, Scottie Hunter. Now Scottie, this week was a very busy week for investigative stories. You had several, but there was one that got a lot of people's attention, dealing with the Louisiana Workforce Commission. And this one got a lot of frustration. How did this story start? Give us the basis.
Yeah, right. And before we get there too, of course, we're starting this brand new segment. We haven't named it just yet, but I think that the content is more important than anything. So definitely this LWC one, that's one that had a lot of people frustrated, because every time we see these audits, people always question, like, how did this happen? Why did this happen? What did LWC do to prevent it? So basically they paid, in this instance, auditors found that they paid about $1 million to 350 dead people. And that, of course, is a big problem, because those people are no longer with us. Why should they be getting unemployment benefits, especially when people at home are sitting there and they're like, well, where's my money? We get so many emails, we get so many calls about this, people that have been frustrated and just trying to get through this pandemic the best way that they can, and they can't get their unemployment benefits, but here's dead people getting unemployment money.
And this was something that was flagged by the legislative auditor's office. They took a look at this and saw, hold up. We see $1 million going to the wrong people. Now, something that was interesting about this was the auditor's office did point out that it was, correct me if I'm wrong, it was over $1 million, correct, that went out to over 300 people who are no longer with us. So definitely people who should not be getting that unemployment money. But the auditor's office pointed out that there was part of that money that there was really nothing that the LWC could have done to prevent it going out.
Right. It was about $600,000 of that they couldn't prevent from going out. It was a certain system that they didn't have access to, or they didn't have in place, where that couldn't have been prevented. But there was a part of it, about $120,000, that they say could have been prevented. And the reason that it wasn't prevented is because they say that LWC, the folks over there, did not check the death data that comes out from the State Department of Health. They checked it by month. They didn't check it by week. So they could have checked it 4 times a month. They only checked it 1 time a month. And that is how a lot of those cases ended up falling through the cracks, and that's why all of that money ended up going out. So that was something that we asked the secretary about, Ava Cates. We asked her about that specifically. We also had some of our Louisiana congressional delegation weighing in on this as well. So, of course, this gets a lot of attention, not just here at home, but, across the country.
Absolutely. We want to take a closer look at those sound bites, so let's play those for you.
There was about 120,000 that auditors say could have been prevented. What's your response to that?
So that 120,000 represents 0.0006%. So we have a 99.99% rate of successful implementation of the system. So I think that speaks well to what we were able to do. As I've always said, we are not perfect. And there are going to be things that we can learn to do better, because this was not part of our normal system. We did not have a pandemic playbook, as we've talked about. No state agency did.
Nobody wants to see a dollar wasted. I will say, in fairness to the state's unemployment insurance program, they got hit with a lot of claims pretty quickly. As the number of unemployed in our country as a result of the shutdown from the virus was breathtaking. And that put a big burden on our Department of Labor. So they had to go from 0 to 60 in about 3 seconds. And so I'm not surprised that they had problems. I'm not excusing it. Nobody wants to see any money wasted. I'm sure the department didn't, but I will tell you it was much, much worse in other states.
So there you heard from, again, the head of the LWC, the secretary there, and also one of our Louisiana senators, John Kennedy. Another point that Senator Kennedy brought up that I thought was interesting was another big problem with this was sometimes this money goes out and then somebody cashed those checks. That leads to fraud, which makes it much harder for the people who actually need that money to get it.
Absolutely.
That was something you talked about.
Yeah, and that is one of the main points. That is what the secretary hit on as well with me. We've, of course, dug into a lot of these audits and a lot of these instances where there's been reports of fraud within the agency of people trying to take advantage of those unemployment dollars. Of course, when you have a big pot of money like this, there's going to be someone out there that's going to try to take advantage of that. And so the secretary said, look, these are people who are taking advantage, one, of people who have lost loved ones during this crisis, and they are stealing that person's identity, that dead person's identity, and then they are filing a claim with that information, and that is where the fraud comes in. So that's really the crime that happens here, and that is something that the secretary says that they are trying to zero in on. They are trying to go after those people that are, stealing identities, especially from these dead people, and trying to file these fraudulent claims, and they are also going to try to get some of that money back. So it doesn't just stop here. It's not like that money is gone, it's lost for good. The agency says that they are going to try to go after those folks and make sure that they bring them to justice. And of course, because it's not just those people that are hurt by this, it's those people, as you mentioned, that are sitting at home, calling us, emailing us, saying, I can't get my unemployment.
Right. All definitely fair points. And so, again, like you said, this doesn't stop here. This was just one issue brought up by an auditor. And the LWC has been hit with several audits lately that have been very frustrating, kind of revealed some of the problems. You did another story recently where the auditor said that there were some of their employees that may have been improperly paid twice during the pandemic. LWC says that they were following program and that was all fair. That's still kind of up to debate. So there has been a lot of frustration when you're dealing with the LWC and something like this where you're dealing with, this is primarily the work of fraudsters, just adds to that frustration, and it's kind of like one more problem to add to this pile that has been such a headache for so many people across our area right now.
Sure, absolutely. And I've talked to the secretary several times about these different scenarios that come up. Now, of course, with this one, she says with all of these audits, with all of these fraud attempts, they did not have, like a lot of other state agencies, didn't have what she calls a pandemic playbook. Basically, they went into this blind, had no idea what was coming, had no idea the scope, the real magnitude that this crisis was going to take on. And so, she said they're kind of figuring it out as they go. They said that they are trying to fix things. Yeah, they're not perfect. She owns that. She says, LWC is not perfect. Other state agencies aren't perfect.
No state agency is perfect.
So, she says that's one of the things they're trying to tackle. They're trying to see how can we take a situation that's pointed out to us and then get better from here, improve going forward. So, if they can go after those folks that are trying to take advantage of this, get that money back, and then also, improve the agency in the process, God forbid we have another pandemic or another shutdown, but they'll know what to do going forward once they have this. One other thing that Senator Kennedy pointed out too is that this is not just a Louisiana issue. I know that, obviously I focus on Louisiana and focus on the things that are happening here for folks in our state, but this is something that is happening all across the country. Other, unemployment agencies are dealing with the same exact thing all over the country. I know one of the other stories that I did recently where the auditors found that prisoners were being paid unemployment funds. If you remember that one, when I spoke with the auditors, they said, again, this is happening all over the country. And so that's something that's really important to point out and just to kind of keep in the back of your mind as you see us do more and more of these. It's not just a Louisiana issue. I know that people like to think that, Louisiana has a reputation for, fraud and things like that, but, it's not isolated to Louisiana. I do want to make that point and make it very clear that, it affects not just Louisiana, but everywhere across the country.
Yeah, it's a difficult time everywhere you look, and especially when you're dealing, as you mentioned, with such a large pot of money and so many people who are legitimately in need. There's always going to be a bad guy. It's like after a hurricane, after a natural disaster, you always have the scam artists come out trying to take advantage of people who are in a vulnerable situation.
Yeah, we know that well. And the secretary also says, you have that pressure, not just from, making sure that the money isn't falling in the wrong hands, but you also have that pressure, as we know, of do it faster, do more, get as much money out the door as you can. And so it's kind of a balancing act of trying to do it as quickly as you can, but also be efficient as well.
Absolutely. So Scottie, as we've mentioned several times, this is not the only story that you have done on the LWC throughout this whole process. And if people want to watch this story and any of the other ones, where do they find them?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll walk over here to this other screen, and this is the story that we've been talking about primarily. Of course, the video's right there, and then we have the article that follows under that. Also, the other story that we also mentioned a few minutes ago about those employees from LWC possibly being improperly paid, that is this story. All of these stories, though, you can find in the investigator section of the 9 News app. You just go to our website, click right there on the investigator section there at the top, and that will take you to all of those stories that we have been working on. Again, as you mentioned, very busy week this week, but you know, it's always busy for the 9 News investigators. We are always trying to get out as much content because we know that here in Baton Rouge, I mean, there's such a appetite for that kind of investigative reporting. So definitely we're trying to stay on top of it, as many stories as we can, and we know that a lot of folks call us, email us, reach out to us about different stories that they want us to look into. And we really do try to get to as many as we can. But you know, it's hard to kind of find a time to do that because people are always calling, but I'm always constantly trying to turn something, you know, so it's, again, a balancing act of trying to get as much out there, but also respond to viewers when they call and email and need us to look into something.
Absolutely. All right, lead investigator Scottie Hunter kind of giving us a behind-the-scenes peek at or insight into kind of how this story came about. Now, stay with us every week. We're going to be kind of breaking down one of the big stories of the week, taking you behind the scenes, talking about the process, and some of those things that you might not necessarily see on camera at the end of the day. But on behalf of Scottie Hunter and myself, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.